mailbag of the day coming from our friend Aiden M at 19Flyers75 says, "Hey Bill, if you don't have a mailbag question of the day yet, I thought I'd ask, how much do you think the current coaching staff, Torts and Bradshaw, influence the front office's approach to the draft? How much should the coaching staff influence the draft?" And first of all, Aiden, this is the most polite question I've ever been asked on the show, and this is now the standard. I'm going to select mailbag questions based on how polite you are to me.
Yeah, be nice to Bill.
Not Charlie, though. Charlie, we talked about this a little earlier with and you mentioned it in your mock draft with the selection of Carter Yakimchuk.
I did.
All right, so Flyers really think they can develop some defensemen. Listen, they turned Rasmus Ristolainen into, a negative into a positive. They went Nick Seeler. He went from an extra guy who willing to throw the body around a little to, is he a legit top four? Because he kind of played like it last year, at least when he was alongside Sean Walker. We saw the step Cam York took. Maybe that's part of his development just because he's good. Maybe it has something to do. We also saw Travis Sanheim, who I disliked up until this year. Now I think he's pretty freaking good. This might be one of the good things about the current staff, but there's always the question, how long is Torts going to be here? How long is Bradshaw, an assistant, going to be here? So how much do you think this should weigh into decisions at the draft?
It's an interesting question. The one, because there's really two sides of this. There is the positive side of the impact potentially of Bradshaw, because it does appear that he is something of a defenseman whisperer in terms of development. Then there's the negative side of, are there players who you would be afraid to have John Tortorella coach because you're afraid that they, don't quite have that style of play that John Tortorella tends to gravitate towards? What I will say is that I certainly don't think they should be not taking guys because they are afraid that Torts might not like them. However, I do think there is probably some overlap in terms of the things that Torts likes in a player and the things that Jonesy and Danny like in a player. Things like high compete level, high work ethic, how much they seem to care. Those sorts of things are things that will probably maybe at least put you on the path to being in Torts' good graces, and are also things that the Flyers have historically valued. But the idea of you can't take Berkeley Catton because he'll never be able to function under Torts, that's stupid. Because number one, it might take Berkeley Catton 2 to 3 years to get to the NHL, and by the time he does, John Tortorella might be either retired, fired, or kicked upstairs.
I would be shocked if John Tortorella is the coach of this team 3 years from now.
Yeah, I would be surprised as well. So there's that. Now the Shaw question is more interesting because I don't get any sense that Bradshaw is he's not young either. He's younger than Torts, but he's still 59, 60 years old. But I don't get the sense he is eyeing retirement anytime soon. And I also suspect that unless John Tortorella were to be fired in disgrace, I would think that if John Tortorella eases into retirement or eases upstairs, Bradshaw probably will stick around. I think it's notable, and there was some consternation about this during the season of, do you think somebody's going to poach Bradshaw? Well, guess what? I can't confirm one way or the other that he never got an interview, but he certainly never was in the rumor mill, and pretty much all the coaching spots are filled at this point.
That was something I wanted to ask you about with Bradshaw. Is that not a little surprising? So many openings, and the guys who got hired, there's a lot of names. Listen, when
it did seem like a very retread coaching cycle.
Yeah, there wasn't. Yes, Knobloch in season gets his shot. Yeah. But and he's been rumored for years to be he's going to get one of the next jobs, and it finally happened. But we get, what's his name? Oh, God damn it, the Buffalo coach going back to freaking Buffalo.
Oh God,
the Crypt Keeper's dad. Lindy Ruff. Jeez, that blanked on me. But
Crypt Keeper's dad.
Yeah, we have all Dan Bilesma just got a job. Does it shock you that Bradshaw, maybe he did get interviews and we just didn't hear about it, but that seems unlikely, right?
I would be surprised if he didn't at least get a couple, but I've always, and I think this is unfortunate because I would love to see Bradshaw. And look, I'm looking at this from a personal perspective and just dealing with these people as humans. I understand that fans are going to be no, how can you be rooting for Bradshaw to get a head coaching job? He's good. We want him here. For me, I'd like to see a guy who works really hard and is good at his job be rewarded, but I've always been skeptical that he would be a pick because teams, number one, they like if they're gonna hire a coach who has never been a head coach before, because obviously you hire guys who have been head coaches before because you want that experience. They have a track record that you can evaluate. They're known quantities. If you hire a coach who has never been a head coach before, really at the NHL level, generally speaking, they tend to be younger. They tend to be the guys that are the hot candidate with fresh ideas who dominated in junior hockey, the Chris Knobloch types. Like those tend to be, you know, the David Carls who won 2 national championships. Like those are the guys that are the first-time NHL head coaches. You don't see that often, you know, a guy who's 59, 60, 61 who, for, you know, it's not his fault, but he's been passed over a lot in other organizations. He's never gotten his shot. It's just not the sexy coaching hire. And I think organizations, and when I say organizations, I even mean owners, because owners are a big part in the job in picking a head coach. They play a role in that, to be sure. It's not like Brad Shaw is an easy one to sell to your fan base as, look at how exciting this hire is. Now, I think it would be a good hire. I think he would be a good NHL head coach. Maybe a great NHL head coach. Who knows? He's just not exciting. And I think that hurts him in these types of situations.
Yeah, like a lot, when you see the retreads, maybe guys around his age, it's like, listen, yeah, Dan Bilesma, we could have someone more exciting. Also, this dude won a cup.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have the exciting, he could be anything, even a boat.
Exactly.
You know? Like,
exactly.
And then there's Brad Shaw. So we had this comment from your mock draft article about the Flyers taking Yakimchuk that I just wanted to get to as well. And it was along the same lines. The odds seem pretty low that Brad Shaw would still be behind the Flyers bench to coach a D-man drafted next month.
I don't think so. I really don't. Because, again, if the long-term plan, which I suspect it is for John Tortorella to move up the ladder and be more of an advisor, I don't think they would necessarily clean house of the coaching staff. I really don't. I think there's a decent chance that Brad Shaw sticks around for quite a long time here.
I think
he's really good at what he does. Why would you fire him?
It's definitely possible. I always think of guys who like also know what they're great at.
Yeah.
Like Jeff Stoutland is awesome at coaching up offensive linemen. So you know what? He's going to do that.
Yeah, like why would, like, perfect example, had the Eagles fired Nick Sirianni after that debacle of an end of the season and hired a new coach, why would that new coach fire Stoutland? Everybody knows he's great. It would be stupid.
He wouldn't. No,
yeah.
That's why he's survived like 3 coaches.
Exactly.
Like it's just one of those things. And we've talked before, like the Peter principle. You rise to the level of your incompetence. Some dudes are like, I'd rather just be really good and have a job forever.
Yeah, and I'm sure Brad Shaw would love to be a head coach.
I bet he would love to be a head coach, yes.
But if he's a really, really good assistant and the Flyers recognize he's a really, really good assistant and use that Comcast money to pay him like a really, really good assistant, why would he leave unless he's being offered a full-time head coaching job somewhere else?
And maybe he's in one of those, you know, I'm going to kind of sit back and, yeah, if I get a good, like, I'm not just going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not.
And there's also an element.
I'm not going to Utah.
There's an element too here. And I'm not saying that this is the plan. I don't know what the Flyers post-Tortorella plan is. But let's just say that when the other major assistant is Rocky Thompson and you've got a 67-year-old head coach, maybe you're Brad Shaw and you're thinking like, well, if Torts just wakes up one day and decides to retire, I'm pretty sure I'm the guy they might promote.
Yeah. So, listen, anything's possible. I have no idea, but I just, like, all these couple of things we talked about seem to all tie into this one idea, so I wanted to bring that up. Like, yeah, it might be 50-50. I don't know. All things are 50-50.
Yeah,
but
it either happens or it doesn't.
Yeah, but, like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that one day Brad Shaw is coaching Carter Yakimchuk if they were to take him.
Like, I expect at this point, I am expecting Brad Shaw to coach Oliver Bonk. And that was just the pick from last year.
Yeah.
Like, this would be a year later. I don't think it's a stretch to say that maybe Brad Shaw could coach Carter Yakimchuk if Carter Yakimchuk is the 12th overall pick this draft.
We all silly like the mayor.